blinded for her sins, silenced, thrown away, until, 10 years later, a human helped her hear again the city of Lareth sang every morning. It was not a song made by mouths or instruments. It was made by living beings themselves. Towers hummed in soft waves. Walkways whispered under moving feet. Even the air carried gentle pulses, like breath with memory. For Iria, sound was not something she heard. It was something she felt inside her bones, her thoughts, her sense of being. On the day the city went silent for her, the sky was clear. Iria stood in the center of the judgment hall, her hands bound behind her back with cold metal bands. The floor beneath her vibrated with low authority tones, the voices of the council speaking as one. She could feel their words passing through her chest, heavy and sharp. Guilty. The word struck harder than any blow, not because it was true, but because it was final. She lifted her head, her dark eyes moving across the high seats carved into the curved walls. Faces looked down at her, some calm, some afraid, some relieved. None looked uncertain. The decision had been made long before she was brought here. Iria had been an engineer. She had worked on orbital stabilizers, machines that kept the outer stations from falling into the planet's pull. Her work had saved lives. She knew every system by heart. That knowledge was the reason she was standing here. The council speaker stepped forward. His presence sent a strong pulse through the floor, steady and controlled. The collapse of Station 9 took 70,000 lives, he said. The failure came from the core systems you supervised. Iria tried to speak. The data was altered, she said. I warned you. The stabilizers were not failing. Someone changed the... Her words were drowned by a rising wave of sound. Disapproval, anger, fear. The hall rejected her voice. Enough, the speaker said. Your defense has been recorded and dismissed. Dismissed. Iria felt the truth sink in. This was not a trial. It was a ceremony. Behind her, guards waited in silence. They wore smooth armor that carried no sound at all, an old symbol of punishment. Silence was death to their people. The speaker raised one hand. For negligence, for betrayal, for causing the great fall. You are sentenced to sensory severance and exile. The hall vibrated harder now. Some watched closely. Others turned away. Iria's breath grew uneven. You know what this means, she said. Without it, I cannot. You will live, the speaker replied. That is mercy. Mercy. She was dragged from the hall before she could speak again. The chamber of severance was small and white, its walls smooth and cold. Iria was strapped into a curved chair, her head held still by metal arms. Above her, the machine waited. It was ancient, used rarely, spoken of in warnings and stories. The technician avoided her eyes. I did nothing, Iria said softly. Ah. You know that? The technician's hand shook. Please, he whispered, do not speak. The machine activated. Pain came first, sharp and sudden, then spreading like fire through her skull. Iria screamed, but even as she did, she felt something tearing away inside her. The living sense that connected her to the world cracked and broke. Then there was nothing. No vibration. No hum. No presence. Only emptiness. When she woke, she lay on a cold floor. The world felt wrong. Flat. Distant. Her own body felt unfamiliar, as if part of her had She opened her mouth and screamed again. She could not feel it. Panic flooded her chest. She pressed her hands to the floor, to the wall, to her own throat. No response came back. The city was gone. The song was gone. Footsteps approached. Shh! She did not feel them until she saw shadows move. "You are no longer part of us," a guard said. His words meant nothing to her now. She could see his mouth move, but the meaning came only from memory. She was lifted, dragged, and thrown into a transport pod. The launch was violent. Iria was slammed back as the pod tore free of the city and into the black of space. She curled inward, gripping herself, trying to remember sound. She failed. Hours later, the pod crashed. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Metal screamed and tore, though she could not hear it. The pod rolled, struck stone, and came to rest at an angle. Iria lay still for a long time. When she finally moved, she pushed the hatch open and crawled out. The moon was gray and broken, littered with wreckage from centuries of exile. Twisted metal, burned hulls, dead machines. The sky above was thin and pale, barely holding light. This was where they sent the forgotten. Iria tried to stand. Her legs shook, but she remained upright. She looked around, searching for any sign of life. There was none. The pod behind her began to burn. She stepped away as it collapsed, sending smoke into the weak sky. She watched until it was gone. That was when she understood. They did not expect her to survive. She fell to her knees, her hands digging into dust and stone. Her chest burned with rage and grief. Tears ran down her face, warm and useless. Above her, unseen by her eyes and untouched by her silence, a transmission continued to pulse through space. Its origin was Station 9, and someone was still listening. The first days on the moon nearly killed her. Iria woke and slept without knowing how much time passed. The light in the sky never fully faded, but it never grew warm either. Her body ached from the crash, from hunger, from fear. The silence pressed on her like weight. She had never known quiet before. Now it followed her everywhere. She learned quickly that panic wasted strength. The wrecked pod held little. A torn seat, a cracked power cell, a container of dry nutrient blocks meant for short travel, not exile. She forced herself to eat slowly, even when her throat tightened with anger. Each bite tasted like dust. The moon was harsh. Sharp stone cut her hands. Cold winds scraped her skin. She could not feel vibrations in the ground the way she once could. Every step was uncertain. At night, she curled against broken metal for shelter. Sleep came in short bursts filled with memories of sound. She dreamed of the city's song and woke with tears already falling. Many times she thought of lying still and letting the cold finish what the council had started. Each time, something stopped her. On the 7th day, she found the first ruin that was not dead. It was an old shelter half buried under stone. The door hung loose, but inside the walls still held. Faded markings covered the metal, names scratched by hands long gone. She did not know them, but she touched each mark gently, as if greeting ghosts. Inside she found tools. They were old and damaged, but real. Cutters. Wires. A cracked scanner that flickered when she pressed its side just right. For the first time since exile, Iria felt a small spark of purpose. She dragged pieces of wreckage into the shelter. Slowly, carefully, she built a space that was hers. She learned how the moon behaved when storms came, where shadows stayed longest, how to melt frost into drinkable water. Time stretched. Years passed. Her body changed. Her body schwa. Her hands grew rough. Her movements grew careful and planned. She stopped crying out loud because she could not hear herself. Grief became quiet, like everything else. Sometimes she spoke anyway. She told the empty air about her work, about systems and designs and failures that were not hers. She explained again and again how the orbital stabilizers had been altered, how the data logs had been rewritten. Speaking kept the memories sharp. She was afraid of forgetting. One year she noticed something strange. When she struck metal against stone in a certain pattern, she felt a faint echo in her chest. Not sound, not vibration, but something close, a shadow of what she had lost. She experimented. Using wires and plates, she built crude panels. When the wind passed over them, she felt tiny pulses through her skin. Weak, unclear, but real. Hope scared her more than despair. If hope failed, it would hurt worse. She kept building anyway. Far above the moon, space shifted. A human exploration vessel entered the outer edge of the system. It was not large, and it carried no weapons meant for war. Its purpose was study, mapping forgotten places and listening for signals others ignored. On board, the crew worked in routine silence, broken by quiet talk and shared jokes. Long missions made small moments important. Then the sensors reacted. At first, the signal looked like noise, broken pulses, weak energy patterns bouncing off debris. The ship's systems tried to discard it. One technician stopped them. "Hold on," he said. "That's not random." His name was Evan. He was not the highest rank, nor the most experienced, but he liked listening to things others skipped past. He isolated the signal and ran it again. It came from the moon. "That place is marked empty," another crew member said. "Exile zone. No life signs." Evan leaned closer to the display. "Something is still sending structured output. Very weak, but it's repeating." The captain frowned. "Could be old machinery." "Maybe," Evan said. "But it's changing." They watched as the signal shifted, responding to solar interference, adjusting like it was correcting itself. The captain gave a slow nod. "Prep a closer scan." The ship altered course. On the surface, Iria felt the sky change. She did not know why. Only that something felt different. The faint pulses she had learned to notice grew stronger for a moment, then faded. She stepped outside her shelter and looked up. Nothing. Still, her hands trembled. That night, she worked until her fingers bled. She adjusted panels, rewired connections, and rebuilt her crude array. When the wind passed through, the pulses returned, clearer than before. She laughed. She could not hear it, but she knew she was laughing. Above her, the human ship Scans confirmed it. There was a living being on the moon. The crew gathered around the display. A single heat signature moved among wreckage, weak but steady. "Exile," the captain said quietly. Evan felt a tightness in his chest. Or, someone was never meant to. Orders were clear. Investigate. A small shuttle detached from the ship and began descent. On the moon, Iria saw a new light in the sky. It burned brighter than any star she remembered. It moved with purpose, growing larger. Fear rushed through her. Had they come to finish the job she ran? She gathered what she could carry and fled into the ruins, her breath sharp and fast. Her shelter vanished behind broken stone as she pressed deeper into the graveyard of metal. The shuttle landed with controlled force, sending dust into the air. Evan stepped onto the surface, suit sealed, sensors active. The place felt heavy, like history left to rot. Life sign moved, a voice said in his ear. East. Fast. Evan followed. He moved carefully, scanning each ruin, calling out into the thin air, though he knew the being below might not hear him. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. Iria crouched behind a fallen hull, her heart pounding. She saw him then. The shape, the strange armor, not guards, not her people. Something else. Curiosity fought fear. She stood. Their eyes met across broken ground. For a long moment, neither moved. Evan lowered his weapon and slowly raised one hand in greeting. Iria did not understand the gesture, but she saw his posture. Open, careful. She took one step forward. The future shifted. Iria did not run. She did not know why. Every part of her body told her to flee, to disappear into the wreckage like before. Yet the figure standing across from her did not move like a hunter. He stood still, one hand raised, his body turned slightly aside. It was a careful stance, not a threat. The air between them felt tight. Evan took a slow step back, giving her space. He spoke again, his voice calm. She could not hear the words, but she watched his face. His eyes were focused on her, not on any weapon or device. Iria lifted her hands, palms open. She copied his stillness, her breath shallow. They were two beings who shared no sound, standing on a dead moon. Evan tapped his helmet, then pointed gently toward her ears. He tilted his head, questioning. She understood. Her throat tightened. She shook her head once. Evan froze. Slowly, he lowered his hand. Something changed in his expression. It was not fear. It was something heavier. He touched his chest, then made a small circle in the air, then pointed to her again. He was trying to say something about himself, about coming. Iria hesitated. Then she placed her hand on her own chest and nodded once. The silence between them shifted. It became less sharp. Evan activated a small projector and let it float between them. Soft light formed simple shapes, images, a star, a ship. A hand reaching out. Iria watched closely. She nodded again. He offered her water, and she took it with shaking hands. She drank slowly, never taking her eyes off him. The liquid was clean and cool, better than anything she had known in years. Trust came in small pieces. Evan led her back toward her shelter, keeping his distance. When he saw the panels she had built, the wires shaped by hand, the crude array angled toward the sky, he stopped. He stared. Even without words, she knew what he felt. Respect. He knelt beside her work, careful not to touch without permission. He pointed, then looked at her. Iria nodded. Hours passed. They worked side by side, sharing gestures, sketches drawn in dust, numbers scratched onto metal. Evan realized quickly that she understood systems far beyond what her tools suggested. Her mind was sharp, focused, alive. At one point, Evan paused and slowly reached for a small device on his belt. He held it up so she could see, then waited. Iria studied it. Her heart began to race. The device was a translator of sorts. Not for language, but for signals. Evan tapped it, and faint vibrations moved across its surface. He pointed to her chest, then to the device, then back to the panels. Understanding struck her like light. Her knees weakened. She had to sit. Evan waited. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. They worked through the long night. Evan returned to the shuttle for parts, breaking down old equipment, reshaping it with her guidance, despising with her guidance. Iria explained through motion and pattern how her people sensed sound, how it was tied to nerve clusters near the skull, how the loss was not only physical but deeply cultural. Evan listened. He did not rush. When the device was ready, it was small and rough, nothing like the clean tools of her old world. Evan held it carefully, his hands steady. He looked at her one last time, making sure. Iria nodded. He attached the device behind her ear and connected it to a thin band resting at the base of her skull. The metal was cool against her skin. Nothing happened. For a moment, panic surged. Then she felt it, a pulse. Soft, weak, unclear. Her breath caught. Her hands flew to her head. The pulse came again, stronger this time. It was not like before. It was broken, translated, imperfect. But it was something. Iria gasped. She could not hear the sound of her own voice, but she felt it echo inside her chest. Her body shook as emotion crashed through her. Evan watched, his eyes wide. She laughed and cried at the same time. The device adjusted, learning, adapting. Pulses grew clearer. Patterns formed. She felt the wind pass over metal and sensed it through the band. For the first time in 10 years, the world answered her. She dropped to her knees. Evan knelt beside her, not touching, giving space for the moment to exist. When she finally looked up, her eyes were burning with something new. Purpose. She pointed toward the sky, then to her head, then made a sharp slicing motion. Evan frowned. He asked something she could not hear. She stood and moved quickly to her shelter, pulling out old data fragments she had saved. She showed him the broken logs from Station 9, the altered numbers, the missing sequences. Evan's expression darkened as he understood. This wasn't an accident, he said softly, though she could not hear it. He connected his own scanner to her data. Every accident has been beyond. The device reacted. Hidden signals emerged. A frequency buried beneath the official records. Evan went still. That frequency was active. Still broadcasting. Someone had kept it alive. Evan looked at Iria. She felt it through the device. The tension. The weight. The truth was not buried. It was waiting. Above them, the stars watched in silence. And far away, in a place of power and comfort, someone felt a system react and frowned. The past had begun to speak. The device did not sleep. As Iria rested, it continued to learn. Small pulses moved across her senses even when her eyes were closed. The world was still broken and thin, but it was no longer empty. She woke before the weak dawn, her heart racing with a feeling she had almost forgotten. Connection. Evan was already awake, seated near the shuttle, watching data scroll across his wrist screen. When he noticed her standing, he looked up and smiled. she felt the curve of it through the device, not as sound, but as warmth and rhythm. They worked all day. Evan brought more equipment from the ship. Better sensors, power cells, clean tools. With each adjustment, the pulses Iria felt became clearer. She could tell the difference between wind and metal, between movement and stillness. It was not the old way, but it was enough to think clearly. She led Evan through the ruins, showing him where she had found the broken logs, where debris from Station 9 had fallen. She explained with gestures how the stabilizers should have behaved. Evan recorded everything. Back on the ship, the captain watched the feed in silence. The proof was growing stronger by the hour. "This goes deep," the captain said. "We need to be careful." Evan nodded. "But we can't ignore it." The ship received a warning signal that evening. It came from the ruling world. "Unknown vessel, you are entering restricted space. Withdraw immediately." The message was polite, too polite. The captain did not respond. Instead, the ship shifted orbit, masking its energy output. Defensive systems powered up quietly. On the surface, Iria felt a sudden sharp pulse, a wrongness in the air. She looked at Evan and pointed to the sky, her expression tense. He checked his display and swore under his breath. "They've noticed," he said. Automated sentinels woke across the system. Old machines, left dormant for decades, stirred as command signals reached them. They adjusted their paths, turning slow and steady toward the moon. Evan helped Iria pack what little she owned. "We may need to move you," he said, though she could not hear the words. His hands were gentle but fast. She resisted at first. This place had been her prison, but also her proof. Leaving felt like erasing 10 years of survival. Then the ground shook. Not natural. A distant impact sent dust rising into the pale sky. Iria felt it clearly through the device. Heavy, mechanical. Sentinels had landed. They ran through twisted corridors and collapsed hulls. They moved as one. Evan guided her when paths narrowed. Iria warned him when vibrations signaled danger. They reached a deep shelter buried beneath a fractured ship core. Inside, another figure waited. He stood slowly as they entered, hands visible, posture wary. His armor was worn, marked with symbols Iria recognized. An enforcer. Her blood ran cold. Evan stepped between them, weapon raised. The figure shook his head and removed his helmet. His face was older than Iria expected. Tired, scarred. "I'm not here for her," he said. "I'm here because of her." Evan hesitated. The man introduced himself with a name Iria barely remembered hearing in the old days, someone who had served the council directly. "I was ordered to watch this moon," he said. "Not to act, just to listen." Iria stared at him, her hands trembling. "Listen to what?" Evan asked. "To make sure the silence stayed complete," the man replied. "If it didn't, I was to report it." Evan's grip tightened. The man looked at Iria. "I never filed the report." Silence filled the shelter. The man continued. "Station 9 was sabotaged. I saw the orders. I saw who signed them. Your punishment was meant to erase a witness, not a criminal." Iria swayed. Evan caught her before she fell. Rage surged through her, sharp and overwhelming. Not wild anger, but cold clarity. The man knelt. "I stayed because I hoped one day someone would come who could hear the truth," he said. Humans were not expected. Above them, the sentinels searched. The ship detected targeting locks. "We have minutes," the captain said. "At most." Evan made a choice. He connected the hidden frequency to the ship's transmitter. Not full power, just enough. A whisper became a voice. Across the system, channels flickered. Civil stations. Trade hubs. Private relays. The signal slipped through gaps the council had grown lazy about closing. Data spilled outward. Raw logs. Unedited commands. Names. The truth did not shout. It spoke calmly. On the ruling world, screens lit up. Officials froze as systems they trusted betrayed them. Panic spread through quiet halls. Orders were shouted. Countermeasures activated. Too late. On the moon, sentinels turned aggressive. Explosions rocked the ruins. Evan helped Iria toward the shuttle, the former enforcer covering them. Metal screamed and shattered around them. They reached the shuttle as fire tore through the shelter behind them. The former enforcer stayed behind. He raised his weapon and gave Iria a short nod. Then he turned back toward the sentinels. The shuttle lifted off under heavy fire. Inside, Iria pressed her hands to the floor as the device carried chaos into her senses. Not noise, but force. Movement. Impact. The ship caught them in orbit, pulling the shuttle into its bay as defense systems flared. Iria collapsed once they were inside. Evan knelt beside her. "It's out now," he said quietly. "They can't erase it." She looked at him, eyes burning. The cost had been high. And it was not over. Far away, deep beneath the ruling city, a final system began to wake. If power could not be kept, it would be denied to everyone. The countdown had begun. The truth spread faster than anyone expected. Across stations and cities, people stopped and stared at their screens. The data carried no emotion, no accusations. It showed numbers, orders, timestamps. It showed how Station 9 had been sacrificed, how fear had been shaped into law. The council reacted with force. Emergency decrees echoed through official channels. The plan, transmission blocks rose like walls. Old loyalists were ordered to seize control of local networks. Some obeyed. Many did not. The human ship stayed just beyond weapon range, drifting like a quiet shadow. It did not attack. It did not threaten. It continued to transmit, shifting frequencies each time a block went up. Redundancy upon redundancy. Iria sat in the medical bay, hands resting on her knees. The device at her skull pulsed steadily. She could feel the ship around her now, the hum of power, the movement of people, a living thing made of metal and intent. Evan stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes fixed on a floating display. "They're trying to drown it out," he said, "but they can't stop all of it." Iria looked up at him. She pointed to the display, then made a sharp downward motion. He understood. "They're escalating," he said. On the ruling world, the highest chamber filled with noise and fear. Officials argued openly now. The calm certainty they once wore had cracked. "This is human interference," one shouted. "We must respond." Another slammed a hand on the table. "If we strike them, we confirm everything." Silence followed. Deep beneath the chamber, a sealed facility waited. The failsafe was not meant to be known. It was built generations ago, when control mattered more than survival. A system that could overload the core stabilizers of the entire system. If activated, Nothing would fall into enemy hands. It would burn everything. A single command remained locked behind living authority, and that authority was afraid. On the human ship, alarms flared. Energy spikes rippled outward from the ruling world. The captain turned sharply. "What is that?" Evan's hands flew over controls. Massive system charge. If they finish it, the ship lurched as distant gravity fields twisted. Iria gasped as the pulses in her device surged violently. She clutched the edge of the bed, her vision blurring. She knew that pattern. She had designed systems like it. She pushed herself up and moved toward Evan, grabbing his arm. He looked at her, startled. "Ah." She pointed to her head, then to the display, then traced a wide circle, ending with a sharp break. Evan froze. "You recognize it?" he said slowly. She nodded hard. He turned to the captain. "She knows how to stop this." The captain did not hesitate. Then we listen. Iria was brought to the command deck. Screens surrounded her, filled with shifting data. She closed her eyes, focusing on the pulses she felt. Beneath the chaos, there was structure, a rhythm hidden inside aggression. She moved her hands, guiding Evan to adjust frequencies, to align the ship's transmitters not as a broadcast, but as a mirror. They reflected the failsafe's own signals back at it. The system hesitated. On the ruling world, technicians shouted as readings spiked and dropped. "It's feeding back," one cried. "Someone is interfering." The authority hesitated. That hesitation saved them all. The overload stalled. Power drained instead of building. Across the system, people felt the shift. Gravity steadied. Lights stopped flickering. Fear turned into breath. On the human ship, the captain let out a slow exhale. "Well done," he said. Iria slumped, exhaustion crashing over her. Evan caught her before she fell. Outside, something changed. Civil ships moved, not in panic, but with purpose. Local defense groups formed, not to fight humans, but to protect their own networks from further control. The council's voice grew quiet. Its authority was broken. Iria watched the screens as messages appeared. Not praise, not worship. Questions. Who decided this? Why were we never told what else was hidden? Evan looked at her. "They're listening now," he said. She touched the device at her skull. The pulses were steady again, clearer than before. For the first time since her trial, she was not alone with the truth. Yet unease remained. Far from the command deck, beyond normal scans, a final command node stayed dark. It had not activated. It had not shut down. It waited. Someone still believed silence was better than freedom. And they were not finished. The final command node woke in silence. Deep under layers of stone and shielded metal, the system drew power slowly, carefully. It did not announce itself. It did not rush. It waited for the moment when attention was elsewhere. On the human ship, Iria felt it before anyone saw it. The pulses around her shifted. Not louder, not stronger, colder. She stiffened. Evan noticed at once. "What is it?" he asked. She closed her eyes and placed both hands against the deck. The device at her skull fed her fragments. Patterns stacked on patterns. A logic she recognized from long ago. This was not rage. This was control. She stood and pointed away from the ruling world, toward empty space beyond the system's edge. Then she traced a narrow path back inward and clenched her fist. Evan's face tightened. "A remote node," he said. Hidden, the captain turned. Can it still trigger the failsafe? Iria hesitated. Then she made a small motion. Not everything. Enough. If it fired, it would fracture the system's balance. Planets would drift. Stations would tear free. Millions would suffer. It would look like an accident. The last lie. We need to reach it, the captain said. The ship moved. As they traveled, the system changed around them. Civil traffic slowed. Defense groups held positions near data centers. The council's chambers were dark now, abandoned by those who once ruled without question. On many worlds, people stood together in public spaces, sharing the same feeds, the same truth. They argued. They cried. They asked what came next. The human ship did not answer. It flew. The hidden node was buried inside a dead relay station, long listed as scrap. Its orbit was unstable, masked by debris and false readings. The ship matched speed and docked. Inside, the station was cold and narrow. Emergency lights flickered weakly. Evan led the team forward, Iria close behind, and she guided them by feel. Every step sharpened the pulses in her mind. The node was close. They reached a sealed chamber. Inside waited one person. He stood beside the core console, hands resting calmly at his sides. His clothing marked him as former authority, not council, older. From before the fall, I wondered when you would come, he said. The man smiled faintly. You won't use that. Iria stepped forward. The man's eyes met hers. You survived, he said. I misjudged that. Her jaw tightened. This system exists for a reason, he continued. Our people need order. They need silence when chaos threatens. Evan shook his head. You're about to kill millions. The man turned to him. No, I am about to preserve meaning. If truth destroys faith, then truth must be limited. Iria moved to the console. The man did not stop her. Go on, he said. You know how it works. You helped build its ancestors. She placed her hands on the controls. The pulses flooded her senses. The system recognized her. Old permissions. Old trust. She could stop it. But stopping it was not enough. If it remained, someone else would try again. Iria looked at Evan, then at the captain through the open channel. She made a slow motion, wide and final. End it. The captain understood. Do it, he said. The man's calm broke. You don't understand what comes after, he said sharply. Without control, there will be fracture. Civil war. Iria's hands moved. She rerouted the core, not to overload, but to open. She aligned its deepest systems to broadcast, not to destroy. The node began to speak. Every hidden protocol, every buried command, every silent order flowed outward, unfiltered. The man shouted and rushed forward. Evan stopped him. The broadcast spread faster than before. It carried not just proof of one crime, but the full shape of control. How silence had been used again and again. Across the system, people watched and chose. The node burned itself out moments later, its purpose gone. The station fell quiet. The man sank to the floor, staring at nothing. It's done, Evan said. Iria felt it. The cold pulse was gone. In the days that followed, the system changed. There was no single moment of victory, no grand announcement. Authority did not transfer cleanly. It fractured, then reformed in smaller shapes. Humans stayed only long enough to help stabilize networks and share what they knew about rebuilding trust. They refused command. They refused ownership. When asked why, the captain answered simply, "Because it isn't ours." Iria was offered many things: a seat in new councils, a voice of leadership, justice in public forum. She refused most of it. She chose instead to help rebuild systems, to teach, to explain how things worked and how they had failed. Her device was improved over time. Cleaner signals, better translation. She never regained what she once had, but she gained something else: choice. On the day the humans prepared to leave, Iria stood at the edge of a rebuilt platform. The sky above her world glowed with soft light. Around her, the air carried new patterns, not imposed. Shared. Evan approached. "You could come with us," he said. She smiled and shook her head. "This is your home," he said. She nodded. He hesitated, then offered a small device, in case you want to listen farther someday. She took it. The human ship lifted away quietly. Iria remained. As the light shifted, she closed her eyes and focused. The world answered, not with silence, but with possibility.